Hello and welcome, I'm DJ Seep for Star Wax Magazine, and today we're here to talk about Arturia's Keystep Pro. The Keystep Pro is a powerhouse for working with all hardware machines, old or new, MIDI, CV, and a ton of functions concerning scales and chords and amazing arpeggiators. All the functions that they've added to this machine go pretty deep, so we decided to be a bit selective about the different things we'll be covering. We won't be covering soft synths, and we won't go too deep into scenes or chains for the moment. So we've got the Korg Electribe sampler, the first one, the ES1, just for playing drum sounds. It's pretty basic and simple and solid. And just next to it, the Microbrute for that analog monosynth fat bass juiciness. Down here we've got the Rephase CP from Yamaha, which gives us those electric keyboard sounds like Fender Rhodes or Wurlitzer. And the Casio CZ101 for those digital 80s sounds. Let's take a look at the front panel where we have a ton of functions accessible in real time. The tactile loop buttons allow you to hold little short loops just like in DJ software like Traktor or Serato. And just above we see the pitch wheel and mod wheel, both in tactile form as well, but with the LEDs you can actually get the hang of it. Just above we see the transport buttons, especially the shift button, one of the most important buttons. With the shift you can enter like utility menu, for example, or a ton of other functions which we'll talk about in just a minute. Record, stop, and play. Tap tempo, which serves as metronome on. We've got the tempo button and the swing button. You just have to touch it and you see the setting. And you can even select individual tracks to use with a different swing than the global swing. So it's a lot of fun. In the control section, then you access your menu for things like setting the MIDI channels and different CV and MIDI settings. Here you have copy and paste, which is really important. You can copy and paste from one pattern to the next, from one track to the next. We've also got a control track for sending CC messages like automation, and that you can link to any of your other tracks. We've got drum track. Basically, you can choose between drum and sequence. You can put a sequence on the same track. And so that means that you've got 4 sequencer tracks, although the other sequencer tracks also have the option of arpeggiator, and you have a mute button, which you can also use as a solo button on individual tracks. Muting drum tracks actually gives you the possibility to mute individual sounds in your drum sequence, which is really great because then instead of changing sequences, you can mute individual sounds. Over here, these buttons are for organizing your sequences and making chains with several sequences and storing and recalling your sequences. We've got scene, chain, and pattern. Pressing pattern will take you into pattern mode, and that's where you basically store your individual sequences. You just have to press on a step key, and then you have immediate access to the parameters. In some modes you have pitch, but otherwise you have gate, velocity, time shift, and randomness. Time shift is where you can reset your note in terms of the quantize, and it's a super practical function. Here you see the basic sequencer steps that you can just activate or deactivate just like in a typical step sequencer like in the Electribes. And then for each of the notes you can just change all the parameters as you like. If you want 16 steps or 32, 48 or 64. Earlier, I mentioned that the shift key is quite important because it allows you to access all of the functions that you see written in blue just below the step keys and just above the keyboard keys. So when you need to do things like clear pattern, shift key, clear pattern on the step keys, or use nudge to move your notes backwards or forwards in the timing of your sequence, invert the order of your sequence so it plays in the opposite direction, or you can move your notes up or down by semitones or whole octaves. You can set how precise you want it to quantize, or random notes completely. You can just really scramble things up, and it's great for transforming even the most basic sequences. So down below, just above the keyboard keys, you see just as many functions with the shift button, the time divisions for your sequences or arpeggios. You can choose how much random to put in to the way the sequence plays. You can also choose mono or poly mode. And of course, we have a large number of arpeggiator types, the different patterns that the arpeggiator will play. So you've got plenty to choose from for that. And we also can set the octave limit for how high or how low the arpeggiator will reach. And here we have scales, which are really important. You have a lot of scale functions. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. And down here, you set your CV outputs. We've got more buttons down here, such as the hold button, which gives you sustain on synths. And if you're running arpeggiators, then it gives you hands-free play, so then you can go and switch tracks and maybe play another synth on another track at the same time. Transpose is for shifting your notes or chords. You have many options for transposing on the Keystep Pro. It's really, really versatile for that. Tie and rest are for programming steps by hand. And chord lets you play back a combination of any notes transposed on the keyboard keys. Overdub typically allows you to add new notes to your sequences without changing any of the notes that were already recorded before. So let's take a look at the back. We've got many outputs and inputs. We have the on-off switch, the connector for the power adapter, a USB jack. It can also be powered by USB. Input for a sustain pedal, metronome audio out, perfect for sending a click to other musicians, and the volume knob for the metronome, which is very handy. We have MIDI out 1 and 2, MIDI in. We've got CV clock, in, out, and reset out. We've got 8 CV gates for drum modules or other CV gear, and in addition to that, 4 sets of CV outputs, each with pitch, velocity, or mod, and gate. Today I'm only using track 3 out to the microboot, which is my only CV connection. We'll just start from scratch. We've got the metronome going. Let's bump it up to an even tempo with the tempo knob. Let's say 128 BPM. Okay, let's go. Boom, boom, boom. So it's obviously quantized, but I totally missed the first beat. Let's nudge it to the right, and then that way we can get it back on the beat. Now you hear, it's on the beat. We turn off the metronome, and let's get a snare going. Okay, simple snare. And we can immediately edit the parameters. Let's go to step 5 and lower the velocity. And we go to step 13, lower the velocity. It's not as loud. And you can also shift the timing. Let's make it a little bit later. Maybe a little too late. So let's take it back. Okay, sounds better. All right, now it's time for the bass. So, all right, here we go. That's a bit low. Let's bring up the octave. Okay, need a higher note. All right, here we go. Something basic. Now let's set the last step to 8 bars and we record. Obviously it quantized and we're good. So let's check out the CZ, something cheesy. Woo, okay. So now we can record. Oops, we have to set the 8 bars once again. And if you get lost with your notes, you can actually look at the just above the keys, you have the LEDs that show you what notes are in your different sequences, so that's practical too. Okay, let's record once again from the beginning. And I'm not using overdub because I want to delete the previous notes. Here we go. And it started badly, but that's only because I played too long and held the notes. So if you listen to it come around, it's normal, so we're good. Let's take a look at the CP now with the Fender Rhodes sound. It's really velocity sensitive, so you just barely need to play notes. Oh, the distortion is a bit loud, so I'll turn that down just a little bit. Turn on the arpeggiator, and let's check it out. Press hold, free up our hands. So now we can work on the parameters. The timing is really important with the arpeggiator because you can, get it synced. So now we're gonna push it back, get it more relaxed, change up the gate, make it really short, get those really short notes going. Okay, let's bring the bass back and mute the CZ. take a look at the time divisions. It's in 16th notes for the moment. Let's look at 1/8, 16th again. Yeah, and back. And now we can change the octave limit, +1. The pattern type from order to inclusive. And now you can hear the scales changing. It's gonna be better without the bass because the bass doesn't really match, so let's mute the bass. Yeah, we got blues, minor, and back to major. Play with the gate length. And now let's switch to a clavinet sound on the CP. A little funky, sounds good in the distortion. Put the gate to minimum and set the timing so it's a little tighter because it will change between the different sounds. It's a great way to sync up any kind of groove between two different machines. It's just perfect for that. And using the poly setting on arpeggios will sometimes have strange stutters for different scales, so it's interesting to see. It's not always a bad thing, really. You can add triplet to all time divisions. From 1/16th we went to 1/8 triplet. Back to the bass. Sounds kind of stressful, so let's push it back just a little bit. So I'll press on the note and shift it back just a little. Push it back a little more with the other notes, just a little bit, and that typically, it's an easy way to add groove. So there are so many different possibilities in the Keystep Pro, it's crazy. Play with your time shift and don't worry about quantize. Okay, nasty bass time. There's so many things to do on the Keystep Pro that sometimes you forget to play with your synthesizers, so keep tweaking those knobs too. We are back. This time we're gonna take it pretty chill. Let's see what we got as far as drums. For the CZ, I've cleared the pattern. We'll start from scratch. Last step to 8 bars for our synth here, basically. More of that good 80s G's. When you're recording, make sure to, if you have long patterns, make sure that you wait for it to cycle to the beginning before you start playing. Here we go. Alright, back to Miami Vice. Cool. And since I've only recorded 3 notes, if I have a polyphonic keyboard, I can add more notes with overdub and not change any of the previous ones. But here we're just going to leave it like that. And let's move on to the CP. Here we go. So we've got that lovely Fender Rhodes sound, and it's going through a distortion pedal. And this was recorded without quantize. So you've got the variation in velocity, which makes it really kind of flow, and then also it's free in time, because when you turn off quantize, then basically you can just get a much more organic sound with everything, especially with these types of sounds that are typical live instruments. And the Keystep Pro really shows the advantages of working with MIDI, because in the way that you work with sound and your different machines, it's just not processing audio, so you really can focus on the notes and the chords and really more fundamental things. If you've used MIDI plugins in Ableton Live, for example, like I have, then it's just incredible to have the same thing in hardware. The looper allows you to freeze your sequence in different size loops. You can access all parts of the sequence, so you can actually move around while you're in the looper and just loop any part of your sequence within 8 bars. And it will repeat all unmuted instruments, but the arpeggiators will just keep playing regardless of the looper. So thank you for watching. This has been DJ Seep with Starwax Magazine. Stay tuned for more demos, as we've only scratched the surface of this MIDI CV melodic standalone music workstation. Such a powerhouse and a ton of fun. It's a different way of making music. Hope you've enjoyed it. Take care, be kind, stay safe. Peace.